All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the fourth session of Evidence Meets Emotion, where we explore the science behind some of the most incredible human emotion and experience that is love. This work and this podcast series is inspired by this incredible book called Love Happiness by Dr. Vincenzo Berghella, who's the author and co host of this amazing session. You can get your copy on Amazon. It's a great book to read and follow along. Today we've covered quite a few topics, attachment styles, love languages, what are important things about love. And today we're going to delve into an important question that all of us often ask. How do we find the right person? In a world where we're all so different, no two people think the same, no one communicates the same, no one knows how to love in exactly the same way. But how do we find out what makes us compatible? And perhaps more importantly, trying to really understand what are the essential elements of love so we can build and create a harmonious, long lasting, empathic love, which is really the goal that we talk about when we talk about love happiness. So, without further ado, we'll jump right in. And, as always, Vince and I love starting all our episodes with gratitude. So, Vince, I'll let you take it away. Maybe share something you're grateful for.
Kavita, good to see you again. And again, this is my favorite sessions, talk about love, happiness. So super happy and thankful for that. In a couple of days, I'm going to see my mother again, who's 88 and lives in Italy. So, and my sister, and nieces, nephews, in-laws, brother, etc. So I think I'm going to be thankful for spending time with extended family. I'm going with, my wife and kids, and so having everybody together is going to be great. What about you?
I love that. No, thank you for sharing that. For me, I think since we're talking about love today, I, definitely say gratitude for the love of my life, my husband, Tori Helscott. And I'm just so incredibly grateful to have him in my life. We are an amazing team together. We work together. All relationships take effort on both ends, but to have a partner that is willing to co-create and put a show up for you and love you in the ways that are meaningful for you is so important. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. So you know what, we dive right into this chapter. I know, Vince, you started this chapter with saying that we're all very different, and but then you kind of really expand on the science of that too, about like when you put in personality traits, when you put in different attachment styles, like how many various versions of humans we can exist, but yet we somehow figure out to find someone that we can fall in love with. Can you tell us a little bit more about a little bit of the science behind this?
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to debunk a couple of myths at the beginning that I lived with as a teenager, as a young boy, young adult. One that, again, because of our DNA, it's 99.99% similar. I thought when I was young, there are many possible partners out there. They're going to be similar to me, and they're going to share my values, and going to be similar to me. And that's not the case, because actually we're very different, not only because of genetics, the small percentage or fraction of a percent makes a big difference, but also how we're brought up, the parents, the examples of love we see and we've talked about, and the attachment styles we learn, etc. Second myth I lived with is that, again, when I was 17, I even wrote it, some of my first writings in my diary. I wrote kind of like a list of things that I thought, my partner should have. And unfortunately, I wrote tall, thin, brunette, speaks Italian, things of that sort, which really are scientifically proven not to make for a good partner. Not that that type is not a good type or a bad type, but I think that there should be other things that hopefully we'll cover today, Kavita, about more important things like, honesty, trust, you believe in love or not, you like me or not, you know me for whom I am and you love me for who I am, etc., etc. So I think the second myth I want to debunk is that we're bombarded, on social media and internet and TV by a certain body type or look or whatever, and that's really not doesn't necessarily, lead to good things. And the third thing I want to say, and then you can jump in, is if we're similar, but similar not in appearances, maybe not even in certain traits, physical traits, but in values, that's what makes, hopefully, for a better chance, at least, a long-lasting love. And so there's a saying I talk about often in French, qui se rassemble s'assemble, but it's not who looks the same, is who has the same values, same meaning of life, the same way to approach life. Those are usually better, long-lasting relationship potential relationships. Yeah.
Wow. No, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I love it because when I was reading your book, this actually really struck me because earlier in the chapter, you talked about how different cultures have different sayings. Some will say
Yeah.
opposites attract, and some say, oh, similar is better. And you actually looked at the science behind that, because I always still thought opposites attract. Like my husband and we have a lot of very much shared values, but we're like completely different parts of the world, raised completely different environments. There's nothing similar about upbringing or, the way we think in lots of ways. But at the same time, the science shows that when you're similar, it actually works better. And you actually touched on arranged marriages. So I just kind of wanted to share that from, because I come from a culture where like my parents were arranged marriage, and the arranged marriage is a norm. And you identified that the reason those tend to work is the similar cultural background, similar way of thinking, right? You've eliminated the conflict of a lot of co-inhabiting, I think. But then you also point out, like, it's not everyone should do that because, but just because you're from the same culture, your values might not still be the same. So at the end of the day, it still comes down to the thing you want to have similar is values, it seems like, and you use the word, which I really loved, is make value-based choices is, a sentence you use in the book. And I really love that. Can you expand a little bit on, like why having same values are so important? Or are there any, personal values that you really care about in your long-term relationship?
Yeah, we'll talk about the essential love elements in a little bit. And, we also have talked about love languages. Having to be similar, it's easier, if love language is the same. We talked about if you both have a secure attachment style, we talked about that a lot, that makes it easier. And here, hopefully, we'll get to talk about having an altruistic, attitude, from both sides, having positivity, having trust, a partner you can count on, having a good listener, for example, somebody who, again, loves the way you want to be loved and makes you be the best person of yourself, kind of support, respect. I think those things are a lot more important. And I think on a first date, for example, you should explore those things more than, color eyes or how the hair is made up or things of that sort. People pair usually long term with people that they are similar to in those values. I remember a couple long time ago, again, she was, I think, German, he was Thai. I may have told you the story, and they say, yeah, we have differences culturally, religion, language, a lot of things are different, but we concentrate on the things we share. Let's say, we want to live in a certain part of the country. We like the outdoors. We want to have kids or not want to have kids. Work is important for both of us, and we're going to alternate in terms of, giving each other space for that or not. Or, we want to, work is not important to us. But whatever it is, and not important, we should talk about right away. You shouldn't want to change the other. Really, really important. You don't want to change the other. So I think a lot of us know a little bit, at least, who we are, and also therefore what we want in the partner. But we can't meet somebody and say, oh, I'm extroverted. I like to party and music and, events, etc., and dancing. And the other one doesn't. And then you say, oh, but I'll change him or I'll
Mm-hmm.
change her. He'll come around.
Mm-hmm.
No, no. I think you should pick somebody from the beginning. If that's really, really important for you, who is similar in the important traits for you. And maybe you want somebody again who is more a homebody like you are. Um, but you don't marry a homebody trying to make them an
Oh yeah.
extrovert and vice versa. Respect, again, is
Mm.
wanting the best for the other person and liking them the way they are. And maybe that's actually the ultimate thing, accepting some of the things that are different, like you were talking about Tori, and certainly
Mm-hmm.
there are things that are different between me and Federica, but we accept that
Mm-hmm.
and we focus on the positives.
Yeah, no, I love that you shared that. And coming down to values, that's another thing that you highlight in the relationship in the book that I think is so important is, sometimes people at every stage in our life, I think, and once you turn 20, you think you know who you are. Like teenagers, especially, they're
Yeah.
so confident in themselves. They're like, yeah, I know who I am. I know what I'm capable. But the truth is, you don't really until you keep evolving and growing. And I think relationships are such a beautiful place to offer you a mirror to help you see yourself clearer. Because sometimes you think you know who you are, then you're in a relationship with a certain kind of person, and then the things about them really bother you. Then you realize, okay, actually, I don't like this, or I like this. And, I think you talked about that dating is a great thing where allowing yourself to be in multiple, even if you've been through a few relationships, it's not a failure. It's all a mirror to getting to know who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you value. And that way, when you're able to then have the foundation to have a long-term successful relationship. And as I was reading through your book, another thing that thought struck my mind was we all grow and change and evolve. So some people might say, well, what if I fall in love with this person, and then they told me they're this person, but then over time, people change, people grow. It's true. We all will grow. We all will change. But I think at the very minimum, who if that person was real and authentic with you in the beginning, most people's core values or the things that are important to them don't tend to change much. Maybe how they show up into the world,
Correct.
but the core values tend to stay pretty solid. And even if
Yeah.
it does change, it's not going to be an extreme change. And so you still have something to go along with. And as they evolve, you continue to evolve too, to keep finding that harmony. It's
Yeah.
always, there are going to be moments where there ebbs and flow, because during the ebb is maybe when this person is changing and evolving and you haven't caught up, or so I think that's the other beautiful thing is embracing and accepting those ebbs, because you are going to meet the flow again. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I named this chapter um No, we're all very different. We're different and we need to embrace those differences. And I like what you said about change. I want to emphasize we shouldn't change the partner, but at the same time, we can see how the partner changes himself or herself and embrace that. Meaning, Federica sometimes, tells me about some of my character traits that right now that I trust her, I respect her, I really truly love her deeply. I see that she's right,
Mm.
and she's not asking me to change, but she's saying, hey, look, you could have done these things differently, or, I think you're getting mad, you're trying to hide it, but, you're not happy about this. And we dig on that, we
Mm.
discuss it. Communication is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is some change that comes from me internalizing, thinking, okay, maybe she's right, maybe somebody else told me that, maybe if I think about it, there is something there that I could do differently. And so again, not that the partner should change the other person, but can help, with the village, certainly give feedback and think that, women are from Venus, men are from Mars, we're all very different. That we understand, the Venetians better, for example, another example, which is really important, I think, Kavita, is listening.
Mm.
We're all very different, but we need to listen. I think Federica needs and loves to be listened to. We don't have to fix the other person's problem the same way that our partner at work, or fellow, or partner at work, whatever, they sometimes need to vent, and you let them vent. You provide the shoulder. Maybe you don't agree on everything. Maybe, but certainly they don't always want uh, 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 an answer, a
Mhm.
solution, but they want a shoulder to lean on. They want somebody who, if they have something in their teeth, tells them to clean it, but otherwise kind of let them do their thing, and just support them.
Yeah. No, I love that you bring that up because that is so true. Different people, again, we are so different, and asking or knowing your partner in that aspect is so beautiful to know that when they come to you, sometimes they want to just share and get it off their chest. Some people want solutions, especially in medicine. I think where if you're
Yeah,
so used to we need to fix a problem, someone come to you, you're like, okay, let me help you solve this problem, right? It's so easy to flip into that mode.
yeah,
And maybe if you try to help your partner solve the problem and they say, no, I don't need this, and then you say, well, I'm trying to help them and they don't want my help, which is, it's not what they need. And so I love this opening phrase. I've heard a lot of people suggest is when you're having difficult conversations, sometimes just asking your partner if they're coming to share something difficult, but you're like, hey, do you want me to just hold space to hear you? Would you like my advice? What would you like? Because sometimes they may actually need advice. Sometimes they
yeah,
might not always be the same every time. And asking that simple question just allows both partners to have their needs met. I think it's a great way to start conversation. And like you pointed out, communication is so important. I also wanted to segue when you talked about another point earlier is not changing your partner, but then like when shared that Frederica will tell you like, hey, you're getting upset, you're hiding something, whatever. That is love because that's not changing, but that is you love someone so much you want them to be the best version of
yeah,
themselves, and that is helping them uncover their blind spots because we cannot see our own blind spots, or sometimes we refuse to accept those blind spots because it
yeah,
might hurt to go down that path or acknowledge our own feelings. But when someone you love calls you out gently, you're like, okay, they're not. And I think that's another thing, the trust and the respect is so important foundation first, right? Because when they say that, if there's already a foundation of trust or respect, that person is not judging you, they're not blaming
yeah,
you, they're not coming from a place of attack, they're just coming from a place of, listen, I don't think you see this about you, but I do, and I want better for you. I want you to take your time, think about it, and if you think you're ready to address it, then you do it at your own pace. It gets you thinking about how you can
yeah,
continue to be
yeah.
better.
And it helps you because it's also like she sees that maybe I'm struggling, and it may be something at work as well, something that happened that you're dealing with. You're a division director now as well. I'm sure you're looking at some of this stuff, and sometimes you bring that home, and even if you decide not to talk about it and stuff, maybe your partner is like a mirror. She can tell
Mhm.
sometimes what you just said, something maybe you're not even aware of, and it's really, I think, a form of help and altruism to be able to say, look, I see that you're seems to be behaving differently. Is there something wrong? You want to vent? I see it like sometimes she comes back from work. She's doing fetal therapy now, fetal interventions, something new every day. And sometimes she's like, oh, this is so much, and I have to learn so much. And I think the best thing I can do is to just support her and say, look, why don't you talk about it, for the next, let's find a quiet place. The kids are asleep, or we'll leave this with somebody we trust. Let's find a moment to so that you can just let some of the stress out. And many times she solves the issues herself, just talking about it, her I'm sure blood pressure decreases, her heart rate decreases, she feels better.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to touch on that because, creating a place, because you said you let's find a space, a time. I like that you shared that because I think as couples, having a space where you know this is our space to have safe communication, that's built into your system, your relationship routine, where you have a space where this is our safe space for communications. Because like yesterday we did our podcast with Steve Gabby, like how he shared, him and his wife will go for walks together or do the
Yeah.
tandem bike, and spend time in nature and no phone. That is their routine for safe conversations. Or like, we've talked about this before, our dear friend Michael Foley, he and his wife will do morning walks or evenings, and again just check in with each other. And that becomes your routine where you can be vulnerable, you can have these deep meaningful conversations. If you build that into your relationship structure, you always have like almost like your personal therapist or your personal space to do that. And I think that is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that gives us a good segue now, maybe to talk about the next chapter, essential love elements. I put this chapter here because I think it's a good segue to we're all very different, and what can we do about those differences? We talked about some of the things, but I wrote that some of the love elements, and I'm going to read them here. It's first, know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
having a partner who's open to love, courage, because it takes a lot of courage, I think, to get into a relationship like this, finding somebody who really loves you back, altruism, positivity, trust, respect, and eventual also sexual intimacy, which we may not get to today. But I think we can expand on those
Yeah.
issues now because we were talking already about the first essential love element to me is finding out who you are
Mm-hmm.
and what you also like in terms of your partner, what we were discussing at the beginning. And that takes time. Like I'm 62 now. It's kind of continuing a lifetime of knowing yourself. Again, when I was 17, completely wrong, ideas about love. Over time, I've read, I've learned, I've loved. Um, and eventually that's also another thing. I think, at least for me, it has helped when I was young, in my teens and 20s, to be in different relationships. So you also find out what you like, by kind of, trying out. You kind of like, okay, this I like, for example, positivity is so important to me. I remember
Mm-hmm.
going on vacation to Florida in a beautiful place with a girlfriend, and she was so unhappy, it's too warm, or and we had planned it for a year, for this vacation. I'm like, if you're not positive and happy now, you're with me, you should be happy. We're in a nice place. This is the place you wanted to go to. But she was probably innately not a positive person. And, when I kind of, a big light bulb went in my head and like, okay, I know myself, I think I should be with a person in general, aside from me, has a positive outlook in life. That's probably my number one trait I look for. And because you can't change people, I did love her at the time, um, but I was not going to change her. Clearly, all the love I was giving her, trip, beautiful place, her choice, we're not going to change who she was.
Yeah. No, that is so important. And I like that you put, the in the elements that know who you are. And you talk about courage. You mentioned the word courage over there earlier. Because I
Yeah,
think those two really go hand in hand. Because once you go through relationships, you start seeing and understanding parts of yourself. You start knowing what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and you start to know who you are. The next step, I think, is really important is having the courage to pursue the thing that aligns with you.
yeah,
Because, like you mentioned, you shared that story. Once you knew who you are, you were you found out this part. You're not going to change this person, and that is something so important to you. I'm sure it took so much courage for you to say, I have to choose to find a place where I can feel positive or be with someone that's positive. It takes a lot of heartbreak, it takes a lot of courage, but at the end of the day, it comes from one thing. It comes from self-love. And I think we all owe ourselves that much first before we can love another human being well. If you love yourself, you will be able to find the love you deserve. And if you don't love yourself, a lot of people might choose to stay in those situations. They don't love enough themselves enough to have the courage, or they want to, but it's scary, right? So I don't know, I think just knowing who you are and courage goes hand in hand.
Yeah, yeah, and what you said is beautiful. It's also in the book. If you don't hold yourself in somewhat high esteem in terms of your values and who you are, you have to love yourself first. You said it beautifully. In fact, there's a bunch of science that says if you're depressed, you're down, you don't like yourself, you're going to be loved that way. You're not going to be given the same love you will be given if you're positive about yourself, if you quote unquote like yourself. And related to this, you have to be yourself in life. There's a beautiful book I read many years ago in Italian, and it's translated to, it's called One, No One, 100,000. And it's by this Pirandello author who won the Nobel Prize actually for literature many, many years ago. And he talks about the fact that you can be one, there's one Kavita, you can be no one, and you can be 100,000 people, meaning to Vince there's a Kavita, to Tori there's a Kavita, to Mike there's a Kavita, to Steve there's a Kavita, to your parents there's a Kavita. Like everybody has a different piece and sees you differently. But for you, it's really important to be yourself as much as you can. I always make the example of, I like soccer more than baseball. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with liking baseball more than soccer. But be yourself, tell people what you like, if you like the beach before the mountains, if you like to walk instead of run, or vice versa. Be yourself, tell people, know who you are, and project it so that as much as you are, you're living a true life. And that makes it easier for your partner. That makes it easier for you to find the right love, and makes it easier for your partner to say, okay, this true person, I can like him or her for his own way of being, because if you make it a fake image, a fake external projection of yourself, then people are not going to like you for what you are.
Yeah. No, I love that you bring that. But then I'm going to add to that, because I think in any perception for anything in the world, there's always two sides that create the perception, right? It's like who you are as a person, is that's your original self. But then the perception for the other person is also how they choose to view you, or what meaning they attach to the things they see in you, right? And that view comes from the lens that person is choosing to wear. Some people, no matter how good you are, they're not going to see that. They're focusing on the things that are lacking. Or there are some people that will choose to always see the good in you and accept the parts of you and help you work through. So I think it's kind of a two-way thing. And so also finding a partner that is able to focus on the good in you when you are showing up as your authentic self is so important. That's how you become enough for someone. That's how you feel you're enough with someone, because you don't want to be with someone that's constantly pointing out the bad, or all they focus is that when you're being yourself. Because we all have very lovable parts. We're all flawed, but we also have very lovable parts. And as we go through the world, life is hard enough. You want to be with someone that helps shine lights on the parts of you that's lovable, and help remind you that you are lovable. So
beautiful. Kavita, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I've shared this story. It's a very personal story about my mom and dad and their influence of me. If I've mentioned it in prior things.
Please share that. Thank you.
But in terms of knowing yourself, so I grew up with a mom. In fact, now that I understand it, very similar to me in demeanor. Very extroverted, very much physical touch and words of affirmation, love languages, lots of compliments, very positive. She's 88 now, can hardly walk, you know, doesn't have too many interactions, doesn't get out of the house. And, you call her anytime and she says, how are you doing? Benissimo, great, wonderful. And, it's not really probably true, but, she's happy to be alive. She's happy to be around. My dad was the traditional older, generation, hardworking man, much more, no physical touch whatsoever, no words of affirmation whatsoever, just an example of hard work, which obviously stayed with me as well. But the point is that for many years, probably because I wanted to get him, to love me the way my mom was loving me, and I was feeling the love from one side, not as much from the other side. I think I went on a quest to find somebody similar to my dad so I could change them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I can say it, because again, I shouldn't have changed my dad. He was wonderful in his own ways. He shaped me to the person I am, and I'm really, really happy the way he shaped me by his examples and everything. And he was just not somebody who would share much about private issues and very, seemingly extroverted, but really never talked about the important things, what I think are the important things. And if you look for somebody like that and you want to change them, you're going to be very unhappy in life.
Yeah.
And like going back to what we said at the beginning, Kavita, is I finally realized I need to marry my mom. That sounds psychologically wrong, but she's a lot more similar to me in many ways, values, demeanor, how I look in life. And thankfully, now that's what I have. It takes some time, to realize some of this stuff. And I hope that people who are listening, really listening, kind of, look at their relationship and learn from this. Because again, this is not only my experience, but I think there's, not read so much about it, so much science behind trying to find somebody who is more similar to you in the important ways.
Wow, I love that. First of all, thank you for sharing that very deeply personal story, Vince. And I know it took some time to know those things, but I'm so happy for you that you have that and you found that now, and you're very deeply loving relationship. And you're so right. Like, I think subconsciously we are just trying to heal those wounds inside ourselves. It's
Yeah.
basically a wound. It's a trauma response, right? And our wounds run more deep. They encrypt in our subconscious much deeper than good things, because we're wired for survival, to protect ourselves. So we say, how can we heal this wound? How can we keep going through life? But I think at some point we have to realize the thing that liberates us is love. So choosing the relationship that felt like love rather than what felt like wound, is also an act of courage, and it's once you find that, then you can have a happier life. So no, thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. And then, you kind of talk a little bit about, like, also, giving, where you give your energy, where you're draining, because if you're someone that loves to give so much, and I think relationships, it's not always 50-50, but you want to be able to have that partner that is willing to learn. And I think that's the altruism aspect you keep talking about, is that act of giving. Someone that wants to give you because they know it's going to make you happy, and they don't expect anything. When you have two people that want to just give to each other, it's just a magical thing.
Yeah, it's selfish in a way. That's what I was going to say before, because, for example, making the example, if I'm listening to Federica, talking about, an issue and solving it herself, and just being there and listening. In a way, you may be putting some effort there, you're just, sitting quietly and listening. But it's eventually, to me, it's a selfish thing for me, because she's going to be happier. She's going to be less anxious. She has, quote unquote, vented. And, half an hour later, 2 days later, 10 minutes later, she's going to be a better partner. She's going to be more relaxed, and so I think, obviously giving it's a lot better than receiving, because by giving, you receive so much back. And you need to. The next thing here on the chapter is also accepting your partner, and also accepting yourself and being kind. There's a lot of kindness in that chapter. How you need to be kind to yourself. You said it before, accept who you are, and you have some faults you may not be able to change as much as you get feedback from others, and they're hard to change, and you need to accept that, and also accept the others. There are some study that says that if a couple focus on the positives, they're much more likely to stay together, happily long term. Again, you accept to be different. You do acts of kindness all the time. The more you do, the more the better, the way the other partner wants them, and then it's going to happen for you.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I like that when you talked about that, it benefits you too. I think this is an important thing to remind
Yeah.
ourselves, because especially if you're in a relationship, and sometimes if your partner asks you to do something, for some people, I've heard, these talking with friends, and sometimes there might be like, well, I always feel like I have to keep doing this or that for them. But it all comes down to reframing, right? Every experience you go through in life, if you stop looking like I have to do this for them, think about like I get to do this for them, and not that that's going to make them happier. It's going to benefit me. Like being, I think a lot of times we get so short-sighted, like we have to put in the initial effort. But if you allow yourself to look at the full picture, you realize this effort is going to come back to you, and that makes you want to give even more, unless of course you're with a relationship, because you talked about this too, about like when to know that's not the right place for you. If you really are with someone where you feel you're giving and your needs are not being met at all either, also it's okay to know yourself and say, hey, I deserve better too. Knowing your self-worth, or knowing, because people are going to love you in a way that you tell them is enough. If you accept less than you want to experience in this lifetime, that's all you're going to get. But you have to say, this is so true, because I feel like it's so sad to get the bare minimum in a relationship and say, it's okay, I guess I'll be happy with this, and live your whole life just saying, at least I have a partner. Like, that's not enough. And for some people it might be, but also maybe because they never gave themselves a chance to believe they deserved more than that. And you have one life, you should not settle for a mediocre love. Anything, there are lots of mediocrity things in life, but love should not be one of them. It should be something that uplifts you, makes you feel alive, and constantly wants to learn you. And so I think, again, it comes back with self. Know your self-worth, know who you are, help people see that the thing that is important to you. And if it's not, it's okay to walk away, because there's so much love in the world, and you should give yourself the permission to go seek that. Yeah.
I love that, Kavita. It's so important. The next factor I talk about here, the third factor, associated with long-term love, it's exactly this one you're talking about. The fact that, for example, you need to find somebody who believes in some of these values we're talking about, believes in love, believes in the things we're talking about. There are some people actually, and we talked about it in previous sessions, never had good examples of a love relationships, don't really think you can find happiness in love. And despite that, they want a partner because maybe, in 3 decades, they want somebody to bring them tea when they're old, or just don't want to be alone because they're afraid of thieves coming around or something. But to me, that's not why you're together. You're together for a lot more than that. And it's almost like a work, unless you aim high and aim for whatever job you really want. It's the same thing, even more importantly, with love. You need to want a lot of what you want. And if you don't see it in that other person, change, like you would change job. And hopefully you could do that, early in the relationship. I'll make a couple of examples. Some people go into a relationship and they don't feel as loved, like you said, they don't think it's right. But they begin to say, oh, he's going through a difficult moment, he's stressed at work, that's why, he doesn't do this for me or doesn't have this behavior or whatever. Or even with violence, for example, or things like that. Or, they saw that in their, previous relationships or the way they were brought up, therefore I accept this, continuous acceptance of behaviors that really you should not accept because that's not what
Mm-hmm.
you were looking for. They don't make
Yep.
you happy. And I'm not sure you actually make them happy accepting them for being a partner who's not going to make you happy because you're not going to be happy. And like I was saying before with Federica, she can tell, if I'm not happy, and it reflects on her. She's not happy. So then you get in that catch-22. You're a
Yeah.
negative person, doesn't
Yeah.
believe in love, brings you down, you bring them down, and you're only, going down.
Yep.
And so it's really like you begin a relationship, he's not ready, this previous girlfriend is still in love, whatever, his mom is sick. Well,
Yeah.
that can last a week or two. You shouldn't spend 60 years, 50 years, 40 years with somebody who never gets ready, who
Mm-hmm.
never is giving you what you want.
Yeah. No, I love that you shared that. That is so important. And you're taking away the opportunity for the other person too to actually know how to express love to their full potential. Because maybe even for them, it's like they say, okay, this is
Yeah.
all we need to do in a relationship. Okay, but the truth is, as human beings, we all want more of that deeper feeling. And that also might be a reason why people then start to seek that experience outside of their core relationship because they feel like, oh, I'm not getting to express or
Correct.
feel that here. So again, it comes down to communication. When you're not communicating or addressing those things as they come up, you allow room for those other unfortunate consequences to kind of happen. I also want to touch a little bit on this, because this comes down to the concept of marriage versus love. Because marriage is not equal to love, and love is not equal to marriage, right? Because when you look at the history, because that's what a lot of people think: if you love me, you have to marry me, or if you marry me means you love me. But it's actually not. You look at the history of why marriages even came about. It was a legal contract. A lot of time it was to help build make families come to join together for economic support or family support or health support resources to pool resources. That was it was never about love. And a lot of cultures around the world, like I shared earlier, like Indian culture, was that's why arranged marriage was the whole point. Was it was not about love. It was about how do we grow and build our community, right? So when you get married, it doesn't necessarily mean there is love. You can work to build it, but and at the same time, just because you love someone, it doesn't mean it always has to end in marriage to prove it. It helps to solidify to the world, because I think the world sees that as a sign of commitment. But even if you're not married yet, or even if someone's taking a while to propose or get married, it does not always mean there's no love there. So I just kind of want to make that distinction a little bit.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to speak loudly. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Yeah.
I hear
I
you
want to
perfectly. Yeah,
emphasize.
sorry. No, you're
Sorry.
totally fine. I was reading your lips. I know you were talking about marriage and love. Could you say that again, please?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of the science actually, some of it is old, a lot of it is newer in the book, and I actually try to stay away from the word marriage, even if a lot of the, for example, surveys and studies and stuff may have looked at, married people versus non-married people, like, especially 30, 40 years ago. But it's not that. It's really, a love relationships compared to no love relationships in terms of what we're talking about. And I'll tell you more. I think that marriage sometimes can, for some people, be a detriment. What I mean is, um, love requires a lot of work. We're discussing a lot of active things you should do, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of altruism, a lot of work for the partner,
Mm-hmm.
well-being. And I feel that some people, date for 2 years, 6 months, a week, 5 years, then they get married and they're like, okay, now, give it to me. I married you. I
Yes.
expect, not only
Yeah.
financial, not only a house, not only maybe kids, but
Mm-hmm.
I expect, you treat me well. I expect, you do what I would like, et cetera, et cetera. And really, love is not that. Love is giving and altruism, like we've been saying all along. So sometimes, maybe if you're not married, and if you don't have that security that, where are you going to go? You don't have enough money to leave me, or you don't have a house if you leave me, or whatever. It's better that way because you're kind of forced to continue to build, continue to communicate, continue to keep things on the balance. Like this is not a given just because we've been
Yeah.
together for 2 good years or 10 good years or 40 good years. We
Mm-hmm.
still have to work and give and be altruistic.
I love that. I think marriage or not marriage, just or any relationship, a successful relationship is ongoing co-creation. You know,
Yeah.
that's what it is. And you're so right. A lot of people, once you get married, it's easy to fall into this trap of like, okay, what I don't need to do much more. We're here together, So that's kind of unfortunate there. And I also kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it being in love or marriage. And you had talked about this aspect of respect. We are taught to go out into the world, and we're so nice to everyone. We say thank you for the smallest things. We give so we're like, oh, go ahead, you go open the door for each other, for them,
Yeah.
and everything. But then it's so easy. You don't always see that being the norm when it's your closest people, right? Because you just say, "Oh, we're casual with each other. We don't need to do that." But and I had to learn this through my own personal experience. Like because growing up culturally, Indian culture also very community, family. We do a lot of things for each
Yeah.
other. But in my household, like if we ever say thank you to each other for doing anything, we always say, why are you saying thank you? Are you crazy? Like there's no need for that. Of course I would do that for you. I know that comes from a place of love, but at the same time I realize now, like, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
say thank you for someone? You should express that gratitude so freely to the world around you. Why wouldn't you say it to someone you love so much? So I
Yeah.
think that's a really, and learning to accept that too. You talked about that in the book. Like if someone says their thank you for something, you don't have to deflect it or just say, oh, no big deal, it's fine, or because
Yeah.
then you don't want to deflect or dismiss. They're expressing gratitude. Learning to receive that and then give it back, I think, is such a beautiful thing. So just wanted to touch on that.
No, that's so important, Kavita. You remind me of something super important. Actually, Federica talks about as well, which again, when we were this, I think she told me this when we were, first couple of years we were together, and she said, in my family, we think that the relationship between two people is so much more important than anything else. Relationship at work, with other family members and stuff. That actually, for example, you should be better dressed while you're home than
Mm,
outside. You know, because that shows respect, to the person. You go out
mhm.
and you're all dressed up, but for whom really? For others you don't even know. And she's like, maybe actually you should, because I noticed it because she was wearing like beautiful clothes at home, and I'm like, we're home, nobody, what, why are you wearing this amazing gown or
For
whatever?
you.
And yeah, that's what she said. And I think that goes a long way to kind of reinforce what you just talked about. Saying thank you, putting up a best behavior. I think it's a little bit of harmony. In a way, you do want your partner to accept you the way you are. Again, if one day, you're not smelling great, or, you may you should never use the temper, but, you're not happy. You need to be able to be natural and to be yourself. But at the same time, you want to be the best version of yourself with your partner, number one.
Hmm.
That's when you, and she has taught me a lot of stuff about that, and I leave it now. I think it's It's so important. No, you want to have a partner, another thing I want to emphasize, who wiggles their tail. Like, they're happy to be with you, they
Yeah.
love you, you love them back, you wiggle their tail. And these are some ways to show that you're wiggling their tails. We talked about, you want to go out to dinner with them and look good and be happy. You want to go on vacation, just the two of you. You want to uh, have walks and long talks and quality time together. And it is to be on both sides. I think if it's only you who wants to take vacation together, they always want somebody else around. If they are not giving you the same support because maybe they're not ready for the relationship or not ready to be serious or they're not ready to give it all and be humble and be, how do you say, be vulnerable. So important. We talked about vulnerability before. Then they're just not ready. I'll tell you another quick thing. I am so thankful for the girls who didn't want to go out with me. So thankful. They must have found in me something, maybe it was something visual, maybe it was whatever it was, maybe I was too much or whatever. Like my brother thinks sometimes I'm too much, I'm too outgoing and whatever. But whatever it was, they told me at the beginning. We never got into a relationship, we never exchanged a kiss, we never lived together or whatever. And it's so important to find that out in the first few dates, in the first times you're interacting, versus somebody who, is not sure how you are, you're a nice guy, you seem to love them, maybe you're financially secure, maybe you can give them a house and kids, and then 10 years, 20 years go by, but they never really wiggled their tail for you, they went into it because for whatever reason, not the right reason we're talking about today. And so I really, thinking back, it was painful. I remember Katerina, if you want to name, in middle school, why wouldn't she go out with me? Still hurts me.
Yeah.
Beautiful girl, outgoing girl, whatever. But she didn't think we were made for each other. And I'm very thankful. I would have really been in a lot more pain and wasted time if she had acquiesced to my wish to be a couple. So much better this way. So I'm thankful.
I love that you shared that. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that, and that's a personal, vulnerable story. But that's right. That's the thing. Like, we should appreciate rejection. We need to, as a society, reframe that rejection is not a bad thing. It is allowing you to not waste your time in things that are not aligned with you. Why would you want to go down that path? And I think the worst thing people do is, like, once they find themselves in a relationship, they say, I don't want to break up with this person, or I don't want to tell them this or that because I don't want to hurt their feelings. That's a fear-based mindset, and fear-based mindsets don't lead you anywhere good. Like, you'd rather have that love-based mindset, and love-based conversations are filled with honesty, right? Like, you want to be like, no, we save each other's time. So if anyone's listening, you're going through any kind of rejection or anything, like, consider that a blessing, because, like, why would you want to waste your time? And when you can use that time to now put it towards meeting other people that could potentially align better with you.
Yeah. I think some of the saddest part about this is having somebody who believes in love, male or female or LGBT or whatever, who spends, 2 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years, sometimes 40 years, and then separates because they think, oh, I could never tolerate this, never got better. Well, but you knew about it 30 years ago, And, some people give up on love, some people compromise, I understand. But if you have that longing, that you believe in love, you believe you could be happy, you have something to give, and you're not appreciated for what you want to give, for the altruism and courage, the immense courage it takes to love, then don't lose too much time, because you're not doing yourself a favor and the other person a favor. So again, thank you so much to the people who not only have the courage to love, but also have the courage to say, hey, this person doesn't work for me.
Yes,
I
they're being
better tell
honest.
them month one, week one versus, 30 years later.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And there was this one, person you quoted in the book that I really loved about that. When you are ready to love someone, you also, it's by Dante. He said to be open to love, right? We don't make people fall in love with us. They already have to be open to receiving love or open to feeling love, because
Yeah.
then you're not forcing the situation. There's love exuding from both sides, and that's when you have fertile ground to be honest about what you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I couldn't agree more. And again, the attitude is do to others what they want themselves to be done to them. Give it to them, receive it back. Random random acts of kindness, positivity, altruism. Those are really important factors as we're wrapping up the hours that are associated with love. One last story is, before you wrap it up,
Yeah.
in terms of the positivity, I'll tell you another personal story, and I hope nobody takes this negatively. I remember at a party in New York, I was a resident in New York. I met a beautiful girl, spoke 4 languages, model, really accomplished, very intelligent. And one of the first things she told me is, when my last boyfriend, I almost committed suicide. And she showed me her wrists. I went out a year and a half with this wonderful person in many ways, but I can tell you that should have been a big red flag, that maybe this was not the most positive person, when I found out more about that story and whatever. And instead of, again, at that point, I was fairly young, looking at looks and things like that. There were a lot of people around her, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she's talking to me, and I'm so privileged, this and that. But in retrospect, if things, again, for me, myself, being a yes person means so much than being a no person in general. And once I learned, that episode, many other episodes before and after, then I'm like, I need to go for a yes person. I'm going to be a much better partner for the yes person. Because again, being positive myself, I can, like I said before, I can piss people off.
I
If
cannot
people
imagine that.
if people are unhappy with some things, and I continue to say, no, this is good anyway, look at the silver lining or whatever, they're going to be even more
Yeah, yeah,
negative,
yeah.
Again, I pissed them off. So I think I want to finish with that, know who you are.
Hmm.
And some things that are so important, like positivity, for me, you can't really hope to change the other person and make it into a good relationship. They shouldn't change. They should be who
Hmm.
they are, and you should move on.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Vince. I think that's so important. And you're right. Like the whole, no matter whether it's love, it's work, it's whatever you do in life, I think the most important project you'll ever work on is learning who you are. So you
Yeah.
can live your most fulfilled life, because you will be able to align those pieces. And, as we touched on from the beginning of this hour already, it all comes down to love takes courage. Living life, a beautiful life, takes courage. So once you know who you are, have the courage to fiercely choose those things, because you deserve it, and you deserve to live a life full of love. So to all our listeners, I hope you have a beautiful, loving day, and I hope your lives continue to be filled with love and all the beautiful things you choose for yourself. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kavita. Bye bye, everyone. It was
Bye. Thank
great.
you.
I love this session, Kavita.